23 years ago today. Jill Dando arrived back at her London home and was shot on her doorstep. The murder in broad daylight of one of the nation's most loved television personalities shocked the entire country.
Well, to this day, just what happened that morning remains a mystery. The crime unsolved. Her killer never held to justice.
It's a story we remember all too well, and one that investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas has followed for more than 2 decades. He joins us now. I remember that day so clearly. I was actually on stage in Hammersmith at the time. We were running through the show for that evening, and Jill was a friend. We were all in telly together at that time. A most adorable, wonderful, lovely lady. That's a picture from Children in Need. Looking at the evidence, we don't seem to have come very far.
No.
For anyone who isn't aware of those terrible circumstances that day, what happened on that day?
So Jill wasn't at that time living at her home address. She was spending most of the time at her boyfriend's address, fiance's address, and she would come home occasionally. So it was very opportunistic when she would come home. You wouldn't really know when she was coming home. She came home around about 11:30 on that morning, and she walked from her car, which was parked very close to her home address, literally 30 seconds, walked to the front door, and as she got to the front door, the offender approached her, pushed her to the ground, put the gun to the back of her neck, and a single shot, and she was dead.
You say that she, because she was with her fiancé at the time, Alan, backwards and forwards to his house, so, as you say, not often at that house. When you say opportune, was it planned? Was she followed?
It had to be planned. You know, you couldn't simply turn up and be there. So it wasn't an opportunity. Someone couldn't turn up and do it. They'd had to know where she was. Now, my theory around it is that, and we all know about phone hacking since, I think there must have been some kind of intercept, some kind of knowledge that she was going home that day. And we know that she had communicated via her phone with her agent to tell her, I'm going back home, because she needed to go back home and put some fax paper into the fax machine. When she got home, obviously, she ends up getting killed. A huge police inquiry, the biggest Metropolitan Police inquiry there's ever been, and actually the biggest since the Yorkshire Ripper. It was huge, the inquiry that went into this.
So let's just talk about that inquiry further, because there was lots of different leads explored, the biggest probably being Barry George.
Yeah. So the first point of call from the police was that we think this is a professional hit. They got some advice from America, who were very used to dealing with ballistics and gunshots, and they said this has all the hallmarks of a professional hit. A year on, they didn't have anybody. They had nobody in the frame at all for this. And then they focused on Barry George. Now, Barry George was put in the frame very early on because he was a local loner. He was a strange guy. They then started to focus very much on him, and that's where the whole inquiry then went. They closed down all the other lines of inquiry and simply went after Barry George.
Why would they do that?
Well, because he was a loner, because he had a background in terms of offending in relation to stalking people. He was a very strange kind of guy, and he fitted that stranger profile. And what the Metropolitan Police did is that they got an offender profiler on board. They got an offender profile on board to talk about who was likely to commit this type of crime. But what they did was a major mistake, because they did 2 offender profiles. Then they had Barry George in the frame. The senior investigating officer went on Crime Watch, put an appeal on Crime Watch, and they got an offender profile to basically profile Barry George. So when he was on Crime Watch, they put a profile out of Barry George, saying this loner is likely to do this, to try to encourage Barry George to do something. He didn't. They subsequently arrest him. He gets prosecuted for relation to that. His interviews are staggering. I've watched hours and hours of his interviews. No appropriate adult. He clearly had severe learning difficulties. Yeah. He's asked multiple times, did you kill Jill Dando? He repeatedly says, no, sir. Prosecuted, goes to jail on the basis, really, of gunshot residue. There was an airborne particle found in a jacket on the back of the door, and the search was done. He goes to jail, and he's acquitted. There's an appeal, and he is acquitted.
And that gunshot residue evidence has since been discredited.
Subsequently, totally quashed on the basis that it was an airborne particle.
Wow. Well, as you say, he was charged on May the 25th. He was acquitted on the 1st of August 2008. You have said that the Met are appear to be obsessing still over him. We've actually got a statement from him from them that says the investigation into the murder of Ms Dando remains open. As with all murder investigations, we'll always explore any new information which may become available. And the problem is, for the Met, very little new evidence has become available. But you think, looking at that style of murder, you say that has all the hallmarks of a professional hit.
Absolutely. I mean, I got hold of 52,000 documents from the Metropolitan Police some years ago, and I did a total review on the whole of the file. And what jumped out of there was the lines of inquiries that weren't followed. And some of those, for example, were that there was over 100 potential suspects who were never interviewed. They went down the road of looking at Barry George, and then these hundreds they just put to one side. There was one where there was a specific individual named as having shot Jill Dando, and the gun had been thrown into a canal. And on the specific instructions of the senior investigating officer, he says no further action on this inquiry.
So what are, though, the obviously enormous speculation here, because we absolutely don't know. But there were two things that you've mentioned, that it could have been because of her work for charity, it could have been a Serbian hit. Because of her work on Crime Watch, it could have been a gangland hit.
Yeah, the two main ones, and there's been a number of other ones. I mean, in light of Jimmy Savile and the exposure, some people came out and said that she had something to do with trying to expose a paedophile ring. Absolute rubbish. She didn't. You know how Jill worked. Jill wasn't an investigator. She was a presenter. She didn't go and do those investigations. It had no credence at all. The two lines that do have credence is a Serbian hit. So Jill did an appeal for Kosovan TV, and in the days prior to her death, there was a bombing of a television station. 18 people died, and as a result of that, there was real anger in relation to this from the Serbians. So there's a view that this could well have been a Serbian hit. There is the bullet that was found. The gun obviously has never been found, but the bullet that was found is linked to the type of bullet that was used in the Balkans. It's crimped at the end. What was the time difference between the bombing of the TV station and the shooting? Day before.
So a hit like this, as you know, takes time to plan.
Yes.
Getting someone in place.
Yeah. Well, you could. There are sleeper cells in every country. So there are individuals who sit in every country who can be put into play very quickly.
What a terrifying thought.
What about the criminal aspect?
And the criminal aspect is to do with Crime Watch. You know, so one of the specific individuals who was in this 100 names is a very well-known individual who organises hits. He was never spoken to, and there is a very strong possibility he may have had something to do with it. I don't know who pulled the trigger, but one of the strong possibilities is that this individual, who's a very, very big underworld, individual who's been involved in organising hits on people, may well have had something to do with it. It was a professional hit. This man got away and was never being caught.
Just to jump in on that one as well. If they were about to do something on Crime Watch, and this alleged individual, decided they wanted to stop that. Yeah. Are you aware of whatever they were investigating was stopped because of her?
No, because a lot of work was done around the types of stories that she'd covered on Crime Watch in the months and even the years prior to, and there wasn't anything that jumped out to say actually there's a link between that. But it may well be the bigger picture. It may well be that, we want to send a message out to say that, you front up a television programme like this, we're going to do it. It's difficult to say, and you might be grasping at straws by saying that, but the reality is whoever did this had killed before, was a professional. There's no doubt about that at all. The police initially thought it was professional, then changed their view and went after loner Barry George, which he clearly wasn't at all. And the person's got away. I mean, they've never been caught.
Well, they have got away with it. 22. Well, that's what I was going to say. They haven't been caught yet, and you do believe that actually they could one day be?
Well, I think one has to live with hope for all these crimes, is that one day they'll be solved, because there are families who live at the end of this. Jill's family, brother still exists, they still have to live with this every day and live with it on anniversaries and everyone talking about it. So one has to live with the hope that one day these people will get caught, someone will say something, allegiances change, friendships change, or you might end up with a gun. The gun itself might come back into the system and through the forensics, because it gets caught by some other crime, they match up the gun and then they can link to say, well, who's that gun belong to? So I always live in hope that unsolved crimes will one day be solved, because the families have to live with this torment every single day.
As we said, the investigation into the murder of Jill remains open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, still to come.